Noon.
Nobody got anywhere else to go? Honestly. I'm doing better than bingo today, so I don't know what to say. And I'm following on from the Beatles. I did a little anecdote. I actually went to university in Liverpool, and my claim to fame is I did know somebody. My physics teacher in high school was a member of the original Cabin Club. So anyway, so that was a kind of a bit of a link. So today we moved this one up a little bit from tomorrow. I'll be giving another talk tomorrow on it's called Go with the Flow, and it's about geology. Yeah, I know we got to go with the flow. It's about geography and ecology of river systems. And so come by tomorrow at 1 o'clock, and we'll be doing a similar presentation. It's really a pleasure for me to get back to Guatemala. I worked for 2 years in the eastern part of Guatemala on a project, a mining project, a big nickel mine that was subsequently built. So we're going to have a look today at coastal landscapes, interior landscapes. We'll have a little bit of a look at Mayan farming systems, and then we'll finish off with a quick look at the coast and some coastal ecosystems. So Guatemala, it's really is location. It's got both the Caribbean coast here, very little piece, and it's not particularly fancy, and then it's got this magnificent piece of Pacific coastline down here. Where I used to work, there's 250 kilometers of that. Where I was working was this Lago de Isabel right here. There's a nickel project right on the edge of that, and I'll mention a little bit more of that. It's one of the most productive regions, lots of rainfall. It's got lots of different types of terrestrial and aquatic habitat. And so it's very interesting because it's got everything from highlands through to mangroves on the coast. Puerto Quetzal, which is where we will begin there in a couple of days. It's the largest port between the Mexican ports and Panama. Just to give you an example of how big it really isn't, it runs about 400,000 of these containers a year. Los Angeles does 10 million, so it's a bit of a difficult thing to be. It's right on the coast. It's a great location. It's beyond the coast. There's a very bustling beyond the port. There's a very bustling area, and it's got a direct road up to Guatemala City, which is the capital city, and that's on the way up to Antigua, where we should be going in a couple of days. Yes, that is our ship, and it is a real photograph. It's not AI generated. Interesting where we're going to be docking. We're in the container port right here, but we're also in a coal port right here. Guatemala actually imports quite a large amount of coal. About 1.2 million tons of coal per year comes through this port. And we say, what do we use 1.2 million tons of coal for? Well, right up here, there's a big power station that burns coal. About 10% of Guatemala's annual production in electricity comes from the coal that's imported from this port. And about 26% is biofuels, so it kind of offsets a little bit the carbon balance. So we'll be coming in right here, and you get out of the gate somewhere up here to head off into your tours and wherever you want to go. Guatemala itself, if we look at the Pacific coastline down on the bottom here, you'll see it's particularly smooth, right? There's not one natural port like Acapulco, Los Cabos, etc. along that whole coast. There's nothing. The two real ports that we look at have been excavated, man-made. This is where I was working in the Lago de Isabel, and I will mention, just to orientate you for a little bit later in the presentation, the Sierra de las Minas, which is right here. And I'm actually going to give you the translation. This is the mountains of the mines. Now this is a coincidence. There are mines there, but not the mines that I've been involved with. So Sierra de las Minas is actually now a bioreserve, but we'll talk about that in a little while. Along the coast, we've got these black sandy beaches, beautiful beaches, not the white beaches that we're normally used to, or that we seek, but these beautiful black sandy beaches, beautiful sand. It's almost along the entire coastline that we're passing right now, or we will be passing right now. So it's a really fantastic place. What else we've got? Mangroves. We've got lots and lots of mangroves, and I'll talk a little bit about mangroves. They sit just behind on our South Pacific coast that we're on right now. They just sit behind the sand, and there's thousands of acres of lagoons and mangroves that go quite a long way inland. Oops, sorry, I missed one there. If we look a little bit at going inland, we pass through areas of farmland, we pass through areas of savanna, and we get up to this, which is the cloud forest. You can see the volcano of the water right here in the background. These tropical forests range from about 600 meters to 1,600 meters, 2,000 feet to 5,200 feet above sea level. These are broadleaf forests that are a typical tropical rainforest that you'll see in the area. And the interesting thing about this area is this is where most of the coffee is also grown. So there's a bit of a competition between the rainforest, so there's conservation and coffee production. Where I worked in the Lago de Isabel area, that was that lake over there, we had old coffee plantations adjacent to the mining project, adjacent to the exploration project. Interestingly, these coffee plantations were first put in the 1920s by German immigrants who came across to the Lago de Isabel. In the 40s, Guatemala kicked out all the Germans, and the local people took over the coffee plantations. And some of those coffee plantations have been running for over 100 years. And I was fortunate enough, and you may be fortunate enough when you go on the tours, to go to one of these coffee plantations and see it from the people picking the berries through to the floating of the coffee beans themselves. So it's really well worth a little tour. And that was what you see. So there's a bit of competition between the cloud forest and agricultural production, exactly the same as in many other places across the planet. If you think about the Amazon rainforest, we've got the same competition. People want to cut it down so they can grow crops, and they can grow grass, and that sort of thing. Oops. Sorry, I've got some small problems here with my technical problem. About half the country is mountainous. As we saw from the graph, we've got a ring of volcanoes. Mountains go up very, very high. We're not getting much vegetation up on here. But the beautiful thing about the volcanoes is they generate a very rich soil that with appropriate fertilizer or with appropriate growth of vegetation gives us these beautiful forests. It gives us great opportunities to plant farmland. And as it gets further down to the coast where we are right now, it gives us that beautiful plain where we can grow mangroves, avocados, and other fruits for export. Speaking of mangroves, Guatemala is one of the key places on the coast for mangroves, which is the ecosystem that I want to have a look at right now. You can see around the world where we've more or less got the mangrove forests that this is the extreme potential as to where they can grow. Obviously, it's not in all of those places. But it forms this very rich, diverse ecosystem right adjacent to the ocean. It's a saline mixed with fresh water, and it's a very interesting little place for people to be able to, or animals to be able to live. And remember I mentioned when I was giving the talk on ecology and ecosystems, all of these little jobs that these species have. You can see here that you've got these aerial roots, which give habitat, which provide fish nurseries in the bottom. You've got a lot of mud flats that are brought out because the rivers and the water slows down, and the mud gets deposited, which is very rich for environmental diversity. And then as you come back onto the mainland, you get into the bigger forests as you get up the mountains. And you can see here all kinds of different species, lots and lots of invertebrates, lots and lots of food for fish, and lots of habitat for fish to either lay their eggs or give birth to live young, and the young are able to live in these very safe and secluded areas. Guatemala is one of the few places where there's been a lot of work done on restoration of mangroves. And this shows a couple of gentlemen here. They're planting the mangrove shoots in order to expand the mangrove areas along the coast. Mangroves form, and I spoke the other day a little bit about ecosystem services. Mangroves form a very important ecosystem service in that they not only provide biodiversity, they provide habitat, and they provide food, but they also clean up the water before it gets out into the ocean, so it takes out a lot of the silt. Mangroves also stabilize the coastal system. As you can imagine, if the waves come crashing in from these hurricanes and large storms that we're encountering now, they encounter all the roots that are around from the mangroves, and it kind of acts like a buffer. It acts like a storm surge, and it protects things. So it protects the coastline as well. So very important as they go along. A lot of the plants and juvenile fish would never get to maturity if it wasn't the mangroves. And this is particularly along this south coast of Guatemala. There's extensive areas of mangroves, and we'll look at an area where there's a mangrove preserve, and this is one of the preserves that we've got here. So this is this is also a Ramsar site. This particular site here, it's called the Mangrove Guardians, and it's a wetland zone along the coast. It's just to the north and west of where we're going into Puerto Quetzal. In this particular site, there's about 6,700 hectares, which is about 10,000 acres. And it's covered, and this is the mangrove area along the bottom here. You can see this is all woodlands, and the rivers come through, and it forms a very important, and it's one of the very few sites where you can get migrating birds will stop in here. We mentioned when we were in San Francisco that the migrating birds will stop in and they'll feed on the salt lagoons there. This provides a very important feeding habitat for the migrating birds coming south for the winter. The mangroves themselves look a little bit like that. It can be dark inside, a lot of overgrown vegetation. If you want to explore it, you go in with a canoe. But there are one or two species in there that you might be a little bit concerned about, not wanting to be falling out. The activities that go on there from humans also include shrimp farming along the edge, but we also have these guys that live in the mangrove, and these are actually protected species. I'll talk a bit about these in a later talk. We've got the American crocodile, very rare species. They're in this Ramsar site, and if you're lucky enough, you'll see them. They're not like the alligators in Florida, a completely different species. These are an actual crocodile and not an alligator. And then it also forms breeding habitat for the leatherback turtle and the olive ridley sea turtle. This guy we'll talk about later. He grows up to about 2 meters high. That's quite a big animal when you get them to maturity. And this ridley sea turtle is an endangered species. So just kind of things that you would see that you could expect to see going into the mangrove areas. And if you're doing a tour with that in mind, then look out for these things. But you'll also find diversity of birds, incredible diversity of birds, everything from spoonbills to shovelers, and it's an amazing piece of habitat. When I actually looked away from the shoreline and onto the coast, I was trying to find pictures and information on the indigenous fishing and commercial fishing. And there's almost no commercial fishing on the South Coast, primarily because there's no harbors. There is a little bit of commercial fishing along the coast here, but most of the fishing that's done now is for sport fishing. This is a sailfish. I've actually gone sailfish fishing off of Guatemala, off this coast, and it is a fantastic experience. If you get the opportunity during the season, it's well worth it. You can pull in these fish. Every single thing is catch and release. They are full catch and release. You cannot keep the fish. You can take a photograph of the fish, and then if you want one on your wall in your den, somebody will make you a fiberglass fish that you can put on the wall, but you can't take them. You can get all kinds of fish, mahi-mahi, very rich, where these systems are dropping into the ocean, and also lots of tuna. If you go back to Cabo, remember the cannery at Cabo, that was tuna. So it's a world-known destination, world-renowned destination for sport fishing, and it's very important for as we go forward. We will see, or we have a chance of seeing, some marine mammals. I just wanted to put this up. This is just an area that I wanted to show you. So we do have some marine mammals in the area. We're going to be going in right about here, and this is a view of, so you can see the port here, and this is here. This is bottlenose dolphin sightings along the area. And then we've got this thing that I've never seen, which is a pan-tropical spotted dolphin. That was to say that, try saying that after a few beers, right? Just to give you an idea of what they look like, there's some other species down here. But really what we're going to be looking for are the bottlenose and the spotted dolphins. I've never seen a spotted dolphin. This is what the bottlenose looks like. This is your typical dolphin that you see most of the time. It's got this nose that looks like a bottle, and it's the one that swims around. He's not the one that jumps. There's a different one that jumps. That's called the spinner dolphin. But this is one that we should see going in. And then this is what the spotted dolphin looks like. He's got spots on the back. Same kind of coloring, same kind of shape, same everything. But you can see the spots actually on the fish itself, and that's part of the skin coloring. So that's what we're looking for as we get closer to the port. Those, if you recall from the photograph, from the graphic, were closer into the port. So, looking at the coast again, I mentioned there were very few ports, and that's true. There's one port up here, at Champerico, and there's our port that we're going to down here. There's the odd place where the river comes in that you can get a small boat in, like a tiny small boat, but this is an actual dugout port, and we've obviously got the excavated port here, and this goes up to Escuintla and then on up to Antigua as we go. Fishing in the area has been practiced since Mayan times. So the Mayans had very interesting agricultural practices, and they had also very interesting fishing practices. The archaeological evidence suggests that there was also trade routes along the coast, so you were getting trade moving along the coast as things go with the Mayans. And the communities developed an approach, and because they were smaller in number, of course, up to about 4,000 years ago, they developed a sustainable approach to the management and harvesting of marine resources. They had a rotation. You know how you can rotate your crops? They had a rotation as to what they fished for. So they would fish for a certain species at this time of year, and then they would move on to a different species, and then a different species as they moved forward. And this allowed the species then to recover during those off times. And so then when they went back to capture the fish, there was some fish for them to capture. Unfortunately, later, that all fell away. It was just about how much money you could make. Interestingly, the First Nations in Canada, they also have a similar approach to harvesting of salmon. First Nations when the first salmon came in, they had to wait for 4 days before they could start to fish. So that allowed a certain amount of fish to get up into the upper reaches of the river to spawn and then come back. And it was part of the sustainable approach to fishing and the sustainable approach to fish management and fish habitat. So if we look at the port at Champerico, this is what it kind of looks like. There's a little bit of a jetty and there's a little bit of a shipping port spot. But this is actually not famous for its shipping at Champerico. This is where all the Guatemalans go on holiday. It's their beach town. And it's a beautiful place. You've got surfing, you've got great beaches, although they're black sand beaches, but they're great beaches. Nice sand, nice soft sand. And obviously you've got fantastic sunsets and great food. So this massive wooden pier that you can see on the photograph here dates back to the 1900s. It was for loading ships back then, and it's still a port, but it's really, compared to Puerto Quetzal, which is where we're going, it's a very, very small piece. More recently, the indigenous fishers off the west coast have re-instigated the traditional Mayan way of fishing. So they give rests to the fish, they give rests to what they're doing. So they're putting back, they're using marine biology and a better understanding of fish breeding and fish movement and patterns to only fish as much fish as the population can take. And it was very interesting. When you did a study of fishing in the North Sea in England, there was huge pressure in the North Sea on the cod. They went out and they just harvested the cod, devastated the cod. And that was before World War I. During World War I, the cod stocks rebounded tremendously because nobody was fishing. And then between World War I and World War II, cod stocks went down again. In World War II, the cod stocks rebounded. At the time, nobody really took any notice of this. And they were giving out permits to catch much more fish than there was available, and the people were not able to catch the fish that was in their quota. If you look at it from an ecological standpoint, if you can't catch the fish that's in your quota, then the fish aren't there. So you've got to do something to properly manage that fish stock. And what they're doing here is they've reinstigated the Mayan approach, giving breaks, and they've seen a change in the populations of fish. They're doing monitoring of fish, and they've had a 40% increase in the populations of fish, and hence the fish available for catching since 2018. So that's just in the last 7 years. So what they're doing is really interesting because it really works. So let's move away from the coast and let's move inland a little bit, and let's have a quick look at the Ring of Fire, or the Horn of Fire. I guess it's not really the Ring of Fire because it's slightly off, but we'll have a quick look at the Ring of Fire and how it relates to Guatemala. So we're working our way down the coast here, and we've got the volcanoes, and if you saw Richard's talk on plate tectonics, you've got a very good explanation of why these volcanoes are here. And you can see from this drawing in the corner that we've got kind of a little bit different. It's not the main Pacific plate. This is the Pacific plate in the center that's causing these volcanoes. It's this little Cocos plate, which is probably being pushed by the much bigger Pacific plate in and underneath. So you've got the edge of the Cocos plate here with the trench, and that's causing this series of volcanoes along Guatemala. It's subducting underneath, everything's coming back up. But there's also the North American plate and the Caribbean plate colliding at the same place. So then you say, okay, well that's great. We've got volcanoes and we've got plates and subductions and all kinds of stuff going on, and I think Richard called it a real mess this morning in geological terms. That was the technical term. Ecologically, it's very interesting. So we've got all of this going on, so let's put our capital city right in the middle of it. Which is exactly what we did. We picked a very nice place that was a little cooler, and we built Antigua. So the city of Antigua, this is actually Volcan de Agua, water volcano. There's two, there's fire and water near Antigua. So if you're going up to Antigua, you will see the two, there's Volcan de Agua and Volcan de Fuego. And they put these two volcanoes are right next to the old city. So the Spanish picked nice places. They didn't understand geology at the time, and they built Santiago de los Caballeros, and that was the first capital city in this particular location in 1524. So then there was an indigenous uprising. They sacked all the Spanish out of the city, and for about 3 years the city was empty. But in 1527 it came back, but then it was demolished by a volcanic eruption. So then they re-established it a couple of years later. You can say the Spanish are one thing, they're tenacious about what they're doing, right? So then it was built, and then for a couple of centuries, everything was great. Farming was good, everything was going on really, really nicely. And then the Santa Marta earthquakes destroyed the city in 1773, 200 years later. Everything's gone. So they decided that maybe at this point we would move over to Guatemala and the current city and location of Guatemala. This is actually Antigua, and this is the Volcan de Fuego. This is the fire volcano. So it was one of those things where those volcanic events produced great soil, they produced great ecosystems, there's lots of water, there's everything that works, but the geology just didn't make for a good system. And you can see when you go into Antigua, you'll see the old places, you'll see the old squares, you'll see beautiful old buildings. It's a lovely place to visit. It's a fabulous place to spend a few hours wandering around. So, well worth it. So if we look back at our above the clouds ecosystem, these are what the ecological movement and the conservation and the Save the Earth movement has seen as key biological indicators and key biological reserves, these cloud forests. There's a lot of cloud forest areas, and I mentioned the Sierra de las Minas. That now is a wildlife reserve, and it's really a beautiful location to be. They've got amazing birds. This is actually the Quetzal. That's the Puerto Quetzal. This is the Quetzal bird. If we see that in a couple of days, that would be like a real thing. One of my friends who's a real bird watching guy, he says, you've got to go look for this thing. And I'm sort of like, well, if I see it while I'm sitting eating some food somewhere, I might be very lucky, but I'm not going to be heading off into well, actually I am heading off into the jungle because I'm on one of the tours. You're going to get all amazing things like these ferns, tree ferns. These tree ferns grow probably 2 or 3 meters high, maybe 4 meters high. These are an interesting species because they live in the cuts that rivers make. So there's a cut where the river makes, and they live along the edge. So when you do exploration, you cut roads, right? You cut a road and you cut a face like this, and then you make the road, and the exploration road goes in. That cut face on the road is the perfect habitat for tree ferns. So when we were doing the exploration on this nickel project, we got about 4 or 5 kilometers of these exploration roads, and every single one of them was lined with a protected species. So as we then wanted to go ahead and develop the mine, we had to pick up every single one of these things that was along the road when it should have been along the river. So these are a great thing. And the next animal I'm going to show you was another one that was living in the area. This is a howler monkey. And the howler monkeys, they wake you up at about 5 o'clock in the morning. And where the mine was, it was a protected area. So nobody could go in and hunt, nobody could go in and do anything. So while the mine was shut down, all the howler monkeys moved in, and they made the area around the mine and around the camp where I was living at the time their home. So I had to suffer howler monkeys from 5 o'clock in the morning till 7 o'clock at night when they went to bed. So it was a very interesting thing. And you'll get all kinds of species like this little civet here in and around the area. Again, other mines that I've worked at, the big cats, they come onto the mine site because there's no hunting. So we've got cameras, like what they call cameras trampa, so these trail cams, and we can pick up all of these animals that are coming onto the mine site. They come onto the mine site because nobody hunts them on the mine site because they're not allowed to hunt. So the mine then becomes literally an ecological reserve. The other thing that's really fantastic in this part of the country is coffee and the coffee plantations. There's amazing coffee, and if you want to support the local economy, please consider, if you're going to buy coffee that's locally sourced, that's sourced from an indigenous group. In Guatemala itself, actually, there's a very, very high percentage of coffee is actually made from, is actually produced by the indigenous communities. I think about 93% of all coffee comes from these kind of plantations, and it's not from large industrial plantations in Guatemala. So it's a great place to get your coffee. And you can see here the coffee beans, well, the coffee pods. The bean itself is inside, so you have to take the outside off in order to get the bean, which we then toast and then grind, and then we make our coffee. So speaking on agriculture and thinking about things that were done a long time ago, what I wanted to look at now was a little bit of Mayan agriculture. And Mayan agriculture was quite well advanced for the time. You had systems that really made sense. They don't make sense when you're trying to harvest with a great big machine and you only want one seed or one bean or one type of product. But when you're actually looking for sustainable agriculture, it actually makes quite a lot of sense. The Mayans themselves had this, what they call the milpa system, right? And the milpa is the corn, and the corn was grown along with squash and chilies, and it was also grown along with beans. What you can do is you can use the corn as the stalks so that the chilies can come up, and the chilies then act as a little bit of an insect repellent as you go along. And it really works well when you integrate it into a larger system. So here you see very, very carefully laid out agricultural system. You've got terraces that were built. These are the homes, obviously. And then you've got these raised beds, which is peculiar to this particular part of the area. So you've got terraced farming, you've got raised beds, you've got the integration of beans. The reason beans are important is that beans actually put nitrogen back into the soil. Everything else takes nitrogen out of the soil. So corn takes nitrogen out of the soil, squash takes nitrogen out of the soil, chilies take nitrogen out of the soil. But when you plant beans, beans actually put nitrogen back in. So you'll have a rotation that the Mayans were doing was to take nitrogen out of the soil. They didn't know what it was at the time, but it worked, right? So we know now how it works, but what they didn't know was that beans actually put nitrogen in the soil and everything else goes out. So by doing these rotations, you could then keep the soil very well aerated. The Mayan civilization, and Richard spoke a little bit about this, it was probably in Guatemala about 2,500, 2,800 years ago, and it existed for quite a long time. And then there was a change in climate. There was a suggestion that people have done cores. They've done cores down through the soil in the area here. And it seems as though that there was a specific severe drought that caused the downfall of the Mayan civilization. They've used sediment layers, they've used all kinds of things like snail shells, carbon dating, that sort of thing. But it's also thought at the time that there was a collapse in the structure of the Mayan civilization. So the leaders were unable to predict that the rains were coming, so the leaders were no good. So we got rid of the leaders, and we still didn't get the rains, and the civilization collapsed. So if you don't get the right leaders, civilization can collapse more quickly than you think. Beautiful ruins. I've stayed in the area. They are fantastic. If you get the opportunity, please go and have a look at it. So if we look at the way we run the culture and economy in Guatemala, it's quite interesting. There's the traditional way of doing things. There's the old production. There's still coffee production for 100 years. There's still artisanal fishermen. But we've mixed that in with the people who are able to pay $500 a day or $600 a day to go out on a boat and catch a fish that they can't even eat. So, I mean, it doesn't make any sense, but it does make a lot of sense. So you've got a really diverse way of the Guatemalan economy kind of evolving as it goes forward. Guatemala City, great big metropolitan area. You've got mining over in the east. You've got a lot of tourism coming in, and you've got a few cruise ships coming in at the same time. So it's really a story of resilience. It's really a story of being able to adapt and change. The Spanish finally figured out that they shouldn't build in Antigua, they should move it off to a different location. But what we really want to see here is this blend of old world way of making a living in a sustainable way and a new way of making a living by having the tourists get what they want. There's also other things that are making a living along the coast. One of my favorite things is this. And here you can see the coast right down here, and there's a river system that came through here. And what's being put in here are shrimp farms, prawn farms. So along the whole coast, shrimp production, it's a phenomenal amount. It's a phenomenal number. Whether it makes sense, I don't know. I love shrimp. I love my shrimp tacos, my shrimp, whatever it happens to be, popcorn shrimp. And they've taken advantage of this. And if you look at the maps of the southern part of the coast, you'll see these shrimp farms scattered all the way along. Production, 22,000 tons in 2021. I'm not really sure what that means in terms of consumption of per capita. Would it keep Los Angeles going for a year? I really don't know. But the way they've learned this from is that the techniques that they're using here are similar techniques that were pursued in Thailand. So when I go to my supermarket in Denver to buy my shrimp, it says product of a farm in Thailand. What I'm hoping is that pretty soon it's going to say product of a farm in Guatemala, because I would rather have it local. I don't like shrimp with a high carbon footprint. That's my piece. And if you want to look at what a shrimp farm really looks like from the air, that's what it is. These ponds are all individual ponds. You can see little pieces here. These are aeration areas, so they're keeping the water moving, they're keeping it going, and then they harvest that. So we're blending traditional shrimp catching on the coast with modern sustainable agriculture, more inland. So what we're trying to do is keep the Guatemala economy to be a sustainable one. I think they could go to a little bit more solar and renewable energy, because bringing 1.2 million tons of coal into the country doesn't make any economic sense to me. Obviously, it makes sense to them. And finally, coffee. The coffee that we've got, these numbers are ridiculous, okay? So just be prepared. And like this morning, there's no test. There's 376,000 hectares of coffee with 1.6 billion trees. I mean, who planted 1.6 billion trees? I guess they got planted one at a time, but very, very slowly. I mean, it's a tremendous thing. It's all 99% Arabica coffee. And most of the coffee, and I've got the numbers here, there's 354 large-scale farmers, which produce about less than 1% of the coffee. 3,600 medium-scale farmers producing 3% of the coffee. So 97% of the coffee in Guatemala is produced by small-scale farmers on their own little farms, then selling it on to buyers. So if you really want to know, 44% of the harvest comes from the small scale, but that employs 90% of the people. So it really is, if you're looking for coffee in Guatemala, please look for something that says from a small scale farm, and then you'll be helping the local farmers and the local producers keep their art alive. And I can also vouch for the quality of the coffee. It's fabulous. So, we need to have development. We need to have the balance between development and history. This is an absolutely magical place. If you get the opportunity to go, it's Tikal. They allow you to go to the top of one of these at sunrise. It's a special tour. It's a very limited number of people. But you can go to the top of the pyramid at sunrise. I did it. It's one of those things that gets the hair on the back of your neck really kind of prickly. The whole of the jungle, all the way around at sunrise, seemed to rise up. All the birds came out of the jungle and started to fly around. You could hear the monkeys, you could hear everybody starting to get out of bed, so to speak, including me. Well, I was out of bed a couple hours before because I wanted to see the rest. But it's well worth doing, and it's very well preserved. And as Richard said earlier, when you walk through the jungle, even in Tikal, where they've done a lot of work, you'll see piles of rock covered by jungle. That's another temple that's yet to be restored. Okay, so they're all over the place. It's really fantastic. And then there's other things that you would not expect. This is a cenote. The cenotes are famous for in the Yucatan Peninsula of Mexico. This is a collapsed limestone cavern. It's got a deep lake in it. In Mexico, you can swim in them. But I didn't realize that we had them in Guatemala as well. So go figure, geology always gets it, right? And then there's the use of indigenous culture and indigenous knowledge. We're starting to bring back an understanding to the young people about indigenous culture and indigenous knowledge. And you can see here an elder teaching the people what to do and what they need to know. So it's really important to get this information passed down from generation to generation. And by teaching the young people what the value of a sustainable approach to the economy is, you will then be able to see Guatemala flourish both on the commercial and technical side, as well as the conservation and environmental side. Think about the coffee plantations. Thousands of jobs producing your coffee. What a great way to have your morning cup of joe. So, what can we do as cruise ship passengers? When I went into Victoria, and it was Truth and Reconciliation Day, and the color for Truth and Reconciliation Day in Victoria is orange. And we went into the various tourist shops and we were looking for orange t-shirts. But we couldn't find an orange t-shirt that was made in Canada. Look for the t-shirts that were made in Guatemala, support the local economy. Look for the coffee and the trinkets that were made in Guatemala, and you can do your bit. We're one of 15 ships, 15 ships, to land at Puerto Quetzal in 2025. It's not a very busy port. According to Richard, that's 3 days in Los Cabos. You know, it's 15 ships into Los Cabos all the time, but it's a bit closer. So there's 15 ships going to the port. It helps the economy. By going on the tours, we're helping the economy. So just think about when you're buying stuff. Take time, think about it, and advance things as you go. So with that, Guatemala, I can vouch for it. I've lived there. It's an amazing place with amazing people looking to benefit their country. And I would like to say thank you very much for spending your time with me this afternoon. Not that you have anywhere else to go. And if there are any questions, we've got a few minutes. Yes?
I'd like to hear more about the shopping.
You would like to hear more about the shopping?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, well, that's not exactly my favorite subject. I will say that Antigua has got anything that you want to buy artisanally done. It's a fabulous place. It's got great food, it's got coffee, it's got all the outlets that you could imagine for good coffee and local honey, local dried mango, all of that sort of stuff. So my suggestion was if you can get up to Antigua, then go up to Antigua and go there. They've got markets, thank you, yes. Lots of markets, that sort of thing. Yes, sir? How do the Mayan temples in that area compare to Machu Picchu? Well, in Machu Picchu, you don't have these big pyramids, right? Machu Picchu was a village where people lived, okay? And it wasn't really an area of worship and that sort of thing. The Tikal temples themselves are some of the finest examples you've got in Central America of those pyramids. Just remember that for about 700 years, nobody looked after those pyramids. And the jungle rotates about once every 100 years. So there was 7 cycles of jungle gone over those pyramids. So those pyramids that you're seeing in Tikal and in all the other places have been restored a lot, right, to get them to where they are. And there's a tremendous amount of work done from the archaeologists and the local people putting everything back together again. So, if you want to see Machu Picchu, you're going to see what the layout of the village was like. You're going to see different way of stone building. Stone building usually had 5 corners in Machu Picchu, and there was different contacts like that. And you'll see the way they're all put together. These are actually magnificent edifices where, you know, they had sacrifices and all that kind of stuff. So it's completely different. Well worth visiting both, I can say from personal experience. Yeah. Yes?
The volcano in Antigua, fire and water, you said?
There's 2.
Yeah. What do you know about when was the last time they erupted or how often they erupt?
So when did the Volcán de Agua and Volcán de Fuego erupt in near Antigua? I think it was about 200 years ago, but they're, like Richard said, they're constantly giving off a little bit of steam every now and then. I would defer to our geologist on that, but it's they're not going to sit there very long. They erupted 1700s, we know that, because it wiped out the villages, so the capital city. Yeah. Oh, right at the back. Do they produce wool? Was that the question?
Yes.
Yes, they do produce some wool in Guatemala. You'll see on the stands that a lot of it is woven into shawls, and whether you can buy it in Antigua or not, I don't know. But yes, they do produce wool. Animal? I really don't know. I'm sorry. Yeah, sorry. I'm a miner. I'm not a shepherd. Yes, sir. What is the It's volcanic. So the volcanoes formed a lot. The gentleman over on the side, right opposite there, is the guy who really to talk about that. But what happens is the volcanoes produce this fine material, which then gets eroded by the rivers. It gets rolled over and produces this beautiful fine black sand. But volcanic ejecta, I believe that's the correct term. Wow, I'm learning stuff. You see, I even got the thumbs up. I was listening. Volcanic ejecta tends to be black and dark, and that's why you get the black sand beaches. Same as in Hawaii. The white beaches in Hawaii are from the coral. Any other questions? Oh, yes, sir.
Will we see any restrictions for bringing coffee or agricultural products to another purchase?
Generally, coffee, no.
Yes.
And if it's sealed in bags, you're not allowed raw products. So you won't be allowed to bring in honey. You won't be allowed to bring in like sausage or anything like that. But to bring in a package of coffee or dried fruit that's sealed in a package normally is okay. I brought coffee and I brought dried mangoes back into the US from several places, so I believe that'll be okay. Yes, ma'am.
Some photo done by AI.
Of course. Was the photo done by AI? No, I actually happened to catch. It was up on the pool deck earlier, but we all missed it because you're in here. Yes. How do the sea otters support mangroves? Well, that's a little bit like the question, why don't polar bears eat penguins? Does anybody know the answer? Why don't polar bears eat penguins? This gentleman got it right. Polar bears live in the North Pole. Penguins live in the South Pole. That's why polar bears don't eat penguins. Sea otters don't support mangroves. They're up north. They come as far south as somewhere just north of San Francisco is their primary range. Mangroves are around the equator, as you saw from the map that I put up. So this is just my favorite animal, and I told you I would put a sea otter in every presentation that I do. So that's why he's in there right now. He was up by the pool earlier, but I tell you, you gotta be quick to see him. Yes? Sorry? How safe is the country? I haven't looked at the US official, it's usually a 3 or a 4. Is it safe? I lived there for 2 years and was fine. Would I go into certain parts of Chicago? Probably not. Not where my friends tell me to go. Where we're going in Guatemala, Antigua, perfectly safe. I mean, don't be silly. Don't leave a very expensive pair of sunglasses out on the table, that sort of thing. But because that's normal pickpocketing, that sort of thing. You'll just get that normal. But in terms of Guatemala itself, where we're going, you'll be fine. There'll be no problems whatsoever. You should be. Yeah. Okay, well, thank you very much. Really appreciate it.